Well, good day, my friends. Today we are in Hartford, Connecticut. I don't think I've ever been in Hartford, Connecticut before. We're here for a very special vlog because we're going to talk about one of the most independent, one of the most rule-breaking actresses of her time. Even to this day, she's pretty considered outspoken for her time and probably would have been even for now. She garnered a lot of respect for going everywhere in slacks. She made some of the greatest movies of all time, including Bringing Up Baby, The Philadelphia Story, Adam's Rib. We're talking about the great Katharine Hepburn, African queen. We're gonna tell you and show you where she was raised, and we're also gonna go to her grave today. She had a very fascinating life and very fascinating upbringing, and I think it will help explain why she was so fascinating as a person. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all, it begins right now. Well, surprise, surprise, look who's in Hartford with me.
Hey, just got off the bird.
Yeah, so what do you love about Katharine Hepburn?
I mean, iconic. That's all you can say. When you think of golden Hollywood, she is definitely one of the best. She played by her own rules. She was, like you said, in some of the best, most iconic movies ever made, and just legendary. So
right now we're showing you a fenced-off area. And this was actually the site of her childhood home, believe it or not. She had a very fascinating family. And what's cool is, I don't want to go in there and look around or anything because I don't want to get arrested, but if you look through the gates, you can see a lot of concrete, which probably would have been the foundation. We were able to find some photos of the family here. This was a big part of her childhood. Her father actually built a zip line for the kids that went from the second story of the house across, so kind of a unusual upbringing. So Katharine's mother was a women's suffrage advocate. She was actually an early feminist, and her father was a surgeon, and he also was a proponent of women's rights early on, and also was on the hygiene board and was trying to make venereal diseases aware to people that this was going to be, a cause or something that people were going to deal with in the future, and making them aware. But her mother went to Bryn Mawr and always taught her kids that they could do anything and that they should always speak their mind. And so when Katharine was a little girl, she had an older brother and then 4 younger siblings, so she idolized her brother. And her mother would take, when they lived here, would threaten to a lot of the votes for women's rights marches, and Katharine would hand out flags. So her father, of course, like I said, had a practice here in town. He worked at the hospital and had a surgical practice here. But as a young girl, they would teach their kids, to speak up on anything, to pursue anything that they were interested in, and to teach her that as a girl, she could do anything, that she shouldn't be limited by being a girl. So she was very athletic. It was actually said that she was the most athletic girl in the area and could jump higher and run faster than anyone else. If she had an opinion on anything when they were having dinner, her parents would encourage them to talk about what their opinion was and to discuss the disagreement. So it was fascinating. You don't hear a lot of families, especially back in the early 1900s, living like that. She took pride in the fact that she could run faster than anyone, and that kind of helped her get her foot in the door of acting, because when she later on went to Broadway, she was so outspoken that even though she was cast in several plays, she got fired during the rehearsals. And finally, when there was a play that they needed someone to wrestle a man in the play, that was the one that she got. And that was the one that garnered her so much attention that John Ford brought her to Hollywood to do a screen test. So because of Katharine's parents being, very educated people, they did not want her to be an actress. That's what she wanted, but her father wanted her to be a doctor. And so they sent her to Bryn Mawr in Pennsylvania, where her mother went to get an education. But she was so different. I mean, she was so different than anybody else, because part of what happened was when she was 12 years old, I mentioned that she was very close to her brother. They went to visit their godmother, and the day they were supposed to come back, Katharine said that he didn't come down for breakfast. And so she went up to get him and noticed that one of the curtains was off of the rod. And when she turned around, she saw his silhouette and that he had hung himself. And she idolized him. So she basically took over his personality, adopted his birthday as her birthday. Her younger brother wasn't on the trip and said he was actually back here with their mother and their parents. And the phone call came in and her mother answered the phone. And when they told her that Thomas had died, he said she just slumped over at the dinner table for a couple of seconds and then composed herself and never spoke of it ever again. And that seemed to be kind of a family trait. They believed that whatever happened in the past, that you shouldn't dwell on it, you should just move on. So later on in life, when Katharine's mother died abruptly, her father, after the funeral, wiped everything of her from existence from the house, took all the photos, everything away. And when Katharine would eventually fall in love with Spencer Tracy, it was basically the same thing. She took care of him all the way through everything. And then when he passed away, she basically just didn't talk about it and went on with acting. Same thing when her father died. When her father died, she really never talked about him again. So Katie, a lot of people probably don't know that Katharine Hepburn was a failure at acting. For 15 years, she tried. She did win an Oscar, but she just wasn't having any luck. And RKO, she basically bought out her contract from RKO, and then the next day, the people that buy the movies for the theaters put an ad out saying that she was box office poison. So she came back here and regrouped. So we're going to go over to her gravesite and talk about how she ended up making her big comeback. It's so crazy to see that, I'm sure people come by here all the time because there's all kinds of garbage and stuff in there, and somebody's even pried open the gates. But I just don't, I don't feel comfortable about trespassing and just seeing, just maybe like the foundation and the rubble and stuff is kind of enough for me. But there are photos I'll show you of them having tea in the yard, of what the house looked like. Uh-oh, look at that. Katie just saw these and goes, oh, I wonder if those are her footprints. Wait, that looks like a bare foot right there almost. I think the reason they demolished her house because they built the freeway there. Cedar Hill Cemetery. I'm assuming she'll be in a family plot. Even though she accomplished her dreams of being a gigantic star in Hollywood, she chose to be buried back here. I think kind of everybody respects the fact that Spencer Tracy was the love of her life, and yet he's buried at Forest Lawn, and she's right here next to her brother Thomas. Thomas is right here. He's the older brother right here. Katharine's right there. Katharine Hepburn, 1907 to 2003. She adopted Thomas's whole personality. You gotta understand, when they were kids because of their parents, because of how kind of radical they were seen, they would have to fight other kids. People would throw bricks through their windows, so they were extremely, extremely close. So when she found him hanging, really, really affected her life. That was her idol, basically, her brother. Now, we see that her other kin are here. Her other siblings. See, her brother also became a doctor. and Susanna Hepburn. And then the parents are up here. Katharine Hepburn was her mother. Her mother, actually, they wanted her to run for senator. And her father, Thomas. Crazy to think that they were able to just, when somebody died, they were able to just move on and, I don't know, just wipe away the memories. Even when their son Thomas died, the father here would dispute that he did it. They said he would go out and say, well, he was practicing a stunt. There you can see that headstone. She wanted to be an actress, and everybody was against her. She went to her mother's alma mater college, was a total outcast there, had no friends, and came back and said she wanted to be an actress and quit. And her parents said, nope, go back. So she went back to school, graduated, met a man, got married, went to New York and started her career. And then when John Ford invited her to do the screen test, it didn't go well, but George Cukor had her do a test, and he liked her. He liked her, in fact, so much that they ended up becoming very good friends, and George would end up directing her in quite a bit of stuff, but it didn't last forever. After 15 years, Katharine was back here. So Katie, her father didn't want her to become an actress for one reason.
That is correct.
What was that reason?
He said the only way you're going to make it in Hollywood is if you sleep with the director.
Well, she didn't have to do that with George Cukor, but when she went to Hollywood, she didn't tell her agent that she was married. And she started having an affair with her agent, who was also married. She eventually ended up divorcing her husband, and then her and the agent split apart, and she started dating Howard Hughes and got engaged to Howard Hughes while she was an RKO actress. So not exactly sleeping with, but she really did love Howard Hughes. She said what she loved about him was that he never took no for an answer. She said if he wanted to find a needle in a haystack in China, he would not give up until he found it. And so it was like his daringness and everything and his adventurousness that she fell in love with. And he did actually propose to her. She accepted, and then she said it just kind of fizzled out, and they never talked about it again.
It's like gasoline and matches together. She was a loose cannon, so only someone like that, I think, would be able to handle her.
So I mentioned that her time in Hollywood was up, and she was still seeing Howard Hughes, although she wasn't under contract to RKO any longer. She got herself out of it. People said she was poisoned. Nobody wanted her. So one of her best friends was a playwright, and he wrote the Philadelphia story, and he wrote that part for her. So he wanted to do it on Broadway, and so she started doing it, and she just loved it. And she said, you have to sell me the rights. And she said the reason is because if I own the rights, and this movie, like if they make a movie out of this, which somebody will, it will be so good. If I own it, they have to put me in the movie. So that's what she did. And so when she pitched it to Louis B. Mayer, she said, I want Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. And he said, no, I'll give you Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. And that's what he did. The movie was amazing. She got an Oscar nomination, 6 nominations for the entire picture. And it kind of helped solidify her career to come back. Now, what really was a big change in her life was that she always loved Spencer Tracy. There was something about him that, obviously she wanted him in Philadelphia Story and couldn't get him. But then her next movie, she got him in there and ran into him on the lot before the movie and kind of made a comment about, like, I can't wait to act near you. And he said, don't worry, I'll make sure to cut you down to size. Basically saying, like, I'll make sure to keep you in check. And she somehow fell in love with his personality. Her family members would say, like her younger brother would say, it was because Spencer was a lot like our father. He was very regal. He called the shots. And for her, that was not something that she was very independent. She didn't allow people to tell her what to do or call the shots. But with Spencer, she did. And they made some of the best movies that they both made together, because once they kind of got together, she refused to do anything that he wasn't a part of until, unfortunately, he got so sick that he couldn't act anymore. and she decided to be his nurse and take care of him for the next 10 years. If I remember right, Spencer was living, they were living kind of together at the guest house at George Cukor's property. And towards the end of his life, he was very weak, and she convinced him, Katharine convinced him that he could do one more movie. And so she convinced him to do it with her, and it was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier. And they told him, you know, basically they told the studio he has to film between 9 a.m. and noon. That's really the only time he has strength to do this. So he was able to make it through the picture. The picture's amazing. And then unfortunately he passed away, and Katharine Hepburn would end up winning an Oscar for that role. Now, Katie, that wasn't her first Oscar.
No,
and you would think that because she wanted to be an actress forever that she would cherish something like that. But do you remember what happened with this Oscar?
Well, she really didn't care about even accepting it, so
Didn't show up.
Yeah, didn't show up. Someone accepted it on her behalf and literally put it in a paper bag. And this gentleman said years later he had set this bag in one of his cabinets, and she was at his home, and I think
No, it was at her house.
Oh,
he
it
was
at
visiting her
He
house.
was visiting her house, so she was going into a cabinet, and it was literally still sitting there. They said it wasn't even engraved yet, so she honestly just did not really give a care about that.
Yeah, when he said that she won it, she said basically you can just throw it in a paper bag and do with it whatever you want. And then he said, when I went to her house, then I opened a cabinet, and sure enough, it is in a paper bag.
Probably right next to the Cocoa Puffs or something weird like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's crazy. But she ended up acting. She continued to act and have a career after that, and she lived a nice long life. I love seeing that she's back here. Like I said, I was kind of shocked always when I would go out to his grave that she wasn't out there, but knowing what kind of family she came from and knowing how much she loved her brother Thomas, I can understand that she would want to spend eternity right next to him. As a little girl, she'd go by Kathy. When she was in college, she'd go by Kate. We knew her as the great Katharine Hepburn, legend. And she always knew that would be the case. God love her. Her brother said she never saw herself as a background actor, a supporting actor. When she decided she was going to become an actress and told the family, to their surprise, she meant she was going to be a star. And she did everything she could, including buying out her own contracts. There was a time she was doing a Broadway play as a comeback, and it went so bad that she couldn't wait for it to end. And when it ended, the director said, now we're going to take it on the road. And she thought it was just to humiliate her, so she actually paid him every penny she had to not do it. That's the kind of self-assuredness she had in her art and her career. Rest in peace, Katharine Hepburn. Hope you all enjoyed today's vlog. We'll see you next time from Hartford, Connecticut. Goodbye.